result of the film. Also, in the UK now, we have 24 venues for the film over the next month. So there is a movement within the film world to take up this film and experience and feel what Ben exposes, or I don't mean the word expose, but what Ben develops in the film, the feelings, the circumstances, and overall, the collapse of due process, procedural irregularities, human rights, the conventions of asylum, all of those wonderful inventions of the late 20th century that have fallen into disregard. And Julian is an icon of that. So the film, extraordinarily at the highest level, brings to ordinary people everywhere the fact that our great civil artefacts are endangered. So that's at the highest level. At the practical level and the emotional level, it's to bring Julian Assange out of the dungeon of despair and back into the arms of his family to cherish him and give him warmth and succour.
Ben, can I ask you how long it's taken you to make this film?
Oh, look, it was at least 2 years in the making. I spent several months in the UK filming, obviously, and the filming actually preceded my involvement by about 6 to 8 months. Our cinematographer, Neil's brother, was following John, and then when I arrived in late 2020, we filmed the extradition hearing and continued on through Europe as well. And it continued on through 2021 as well. So, look, it's been an education for me, but really, you know, we hope to create a humanistic story that you could enter and understand Julian's plight through the people who love him. I mean, they say you should judge someone by their enemies, but you should also judge them by the people who love him. And since Julian has been silenced, I think, you know, we've seen John and Stella step into that position just to speak on his behalf. So it was really a journey about a family trying to save one of their loved ones.
And in fact, I'll just remind the audiences that one of the remarks that came from the jury with regards to the film is about the humanity and how personal this film is. So well done, Ben, for being able to bring that out in this film.
Well, I have to really thank the producers for that. I mean, Gabriel Shipton is obviously John's son. The other producer is Stella Assange's brother. And so it's on their invitation that they really brought me into the family and were able to get those intimate moments that really tell the story of what the campaign looks like. I mean, there's 3 levels of it. There's the legal and there's the media kind of support that Julian has garnered. But yeah, at the core of it, there's millions of supporters around the world, and that's where I feel that John sits, is in amongst those grassroots supporters, and it's his interactions with them that I find really heartwarming as well. And it's around the world that we get an opportunity to meet all of them.
And before we go to the questions, I know that one of the things that Julian said, which resonates with us, is the fact that the biggest enemy for people today and around the world is ignorance. And that people are not aware of what's going on. And I think that's a really important message that is being taken back to the audiences and to actually people that are involved in documentary, how important it is to be able to bring the truth to the world. So thank you for that, and I would like to start with questions.
Hello, thank you for this great film. And I have a couple of questions about, firstly, I'll tell you how I felt about this film. Being a parent with 2 adult sons, I just can't imagine being a parent. You have to go through this. It's breaking my heart to see how, sorry. I just feel really, and I see how Julian Assange, how he aged so obviously in 10 years, like at age 30 years, he looks like an old man, and you just know the condition inside. I'm only talking about appearance, not talking about even the damage to him, and then his family can't even see him, and just such an injustice. It just make you really sad and very angry. And I just wonder, because I was on the street a few times to campaign for this free Assange thing, and there are young people nowadays, they don't even know who he is. You know, they say, who is he? And I was like, wow, if I have to explain to you for the whole thing, I won't be able to do, you know, whole other thing, handing out leaflets and doing other. And so all I can do is ask him to go to Google it, you know, and check on the website, things like that. But just at this moment, I wonder, in New Zealand, what more can we do? I mean, to help with this cause. And another thing is, because when I was handing out leaflets and putting on posters for this movie, to be honest, the movie's title is very cryptic and very confusing. A lot of people got no idea what's that about, and it takes a lot of explanation. And when I myself don't even know why the movie called that name, I Google it, I still don't quite understand exactly why. And I find that it's pretty hard when you want to promote a cause or want to help with a cause, when it's so much time and energy wasted on something like that. And maybe the main question is, what more can people do here from New Zealand?
So John, maybe you can start with that.
Well, I mean, there's many things. There's, you know, a group in New Zealand that vigorously advances the cause of Julian's freedom, and joining up with them. There's also ITHAKA.movie, that you can host a showing of the movie yourself. Also, there's a soundcampaign.org, which is a tremendous site. For example, on Julian's birthday, there will be every state capital in Australia is having a celebration or an event, and equally Wellington and Auckland. So that's on soundcampaign.org. And also on, if you want to host Ben's film, you go to ITHAKA.movie.
Thank you, John. And maybe Ben, you can answer the other question about the title.
Yeah, sure. There's been a lot of discussion about the title. Look, I think it's worked in our favour in as much that every time it's been reported, it's been discussed, and people are searching for the meaning. It's a bit of an Easter egg in there. I mean, the reason why we named it Ithaca is because it was based on a poem that John would often listen to. There's a wonderful reading of Sean Connery reading the poem called Ithaca on YouTube. It's worth a look. And it's something at the core of the film that I really wanted to understand is how John maintains the stamina, and how certainly Julian has maintained his ability to continue on with his fight. And it's these small things that allow them the motivation. But really at the core of the poem is a story about destiny, it's a story about life, and it's a story about arriving home as well. And I think all of those manner of meanings within that poem explore themes which we try to explore in the film as well. So, I invite you to look deeper. I mean, that's really what I wanted people to look at after viewing this film, is to go and, you know, look at the film more deeply, look at Julian's story more deeply, and maybe Google that poem as well.
Thank you. Now we'll open it up for the rest.
Some other questions?
Here we go.
Hi there, John, and everyone. Thank you, Ben, for this film. It's Alex here, Candles for Assange and Free Assange NZ. Hi. Oh, thank you. It wasn't meant for that. I really, really am delighted to have seen that film. It's very, very moving. And in Wellington on Sunday, we are celebrating Julian's birthday with 31 cities now, 13 countries, 3 continents so far. So if you can tap shoulders of anyone in Antarctica or any other continent which you haven't managed to get, that would be awesome. I really, really just wanted to ask one kind of technical question, John, to you about the court case. And that is, can we get it to the Human Rights Court, the International Human Rights Court at this point, now that we've exhausted these measures? Or are we going to have him still wasting away in an appeal kind of zombie state, like legal persecution, torture? That's my question.
Hi, Alex. Good to see you. There is an appeal the defence is making to the High Court. The appeal is for an appeal. So first of all, you get permission to have an appeal, and then the appeal is heard. That's in the next few weeks or so. After that, Julian could go to the ECHR, the European Court of Human Rights. But you can't go to apparently you can't go to the European Court of Human Rights until you exhaust all other possibilities.
Right, understand.
As for Julian being arbitrarily detained, that was fully explored by the United Nations Working Group on Arbitrary Detention, and they released their report, damning report, in February 2018, saying that Julian must be freed and pay compensation by Sweden and the United Kingdom. As shocking, these United Nations declarations are ignored or either ignored or derided by certain aspects of the United Kingdom and the Swedish administration.
Well, thank you, John, for explaining that to us. And if anyone wants to come on Sunday, it's 11 a.m. at Left Bank on Cuba Mall. We're celebrating his birthday. And then we're going to hug the US War Memorial. Aotearoa for Assange is the group in Auckland, and Free Assange NZ and Candles for Assange is the group here. So thank you, everyone. Cheers.
Thank you. And kia ora, Ben, John, ko Isaac Tokuuna. Awesome documentary. Ben, I feel like you've had potentially a really tough time making a documentary about journalism, the freedom of journalism, including journalists and journalism, and then also potentially including journalists who don't know they're being targeted by this whole campaign on freedom, kind of reporting the wrong way. My question is, do you think that the modern journalism is representing itself enough and taking what's happening here seriously, or do you think the reason you've made this documentary is because potentially the failing of journalists to be standing up for their own rights in this sense by not diving deep enough on this more special, more humane, connected way of telling the story, especially hearing John's story from the sidelines and seeing that interview where he wasn't given quite enough time to really tell the deeper story. Yeah, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on your dealings with modern journalism.
Yeah, sure. Look, I mean, it's both of those reasons. I mean, I think that the power of journalism has been diminishing, and I think the rise of the internet has given governments a real problem. You know, the flow of information is increasing so much that we hear about things almost instantaneously now, whether it's corruption or whether it's war crimes or whether it's the reason to go to war. And I think that's part of the reason that Julian is being prosecuted so ferociously, is he's been made an example of. Governments aren't sure what to do, and I think that journalism has such an important role to play in that, but it's also coinciding with their diminishing power. So it's a really difficult situation that we're in. I mean, I think WikiLeaks, and Julian has been on the record talking about, they saw themselves as a vanguard in their wake to bring forward a modern journalism that would somehow be less aligned and break this kind of access journalism issue that we have where media outlets are having to align themselves with certain powerful interests. I think it's happening, but I think that, I've got faith there's a 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old out there that's got some wonderful computer skills who's just going to step up in the next generation. I mean, the work that WikiLeaks was able to do, it was once in a generation, if not more. But I think we have to remain vigilant, and I think we have to call for more from our governments, but also from our media, and also supporting media who we think who are reporting in the right way, in the most detailed way. So it's all of those things, and I think they all rely on us to continue their work as well. So we're in flux, I think, at the moment. I think this battle has only just begun, but I think over the next generation, the future journalists that are coming up now will really have a really tricky time. But governments have been warned. They've seen what can happen when they're exposed. So I think for a moment there, when WikiLeaks began, the light was on them. At the moment, I think everyone's whistleblowers are really considering their next moves, and journalists are really wondering how to particularly report on national security issues. So it's a time that we also have to really support the media and journalism.
Kia ora.
Good question, Tony.
Kia ora, my name is Jason, and I'd first off just like to thank you both for putting together such an incredible documentary. I know that was a story that was potentially very hard to tell for both of you, particularly yourself, John. So I'd just like to say thank you for the mana that you put into telling that story. It was very powerful. My question to you both is that Julian's story is obviously one that's very powerful, and you've both spoken to it in terms of it reflecting our current media and journalism environment, and in regards to what the everyday person can do to support not only Julian but all journalists that work to expose inequality and injustice in the world. And I would really like to hear from you both what you think the average person can do to combat misinformation and to really support truth and justice in the world. I'd love to hear from you both.
After you then.
Okay, well, look, as a start, I think there's some wonderful organisations out there. There's the Reporters Without Borders. They make a report annually, I think, about the persecution of journalists around the world. One thing I would say is that it's really important to keep your own governments and your own media organisations under scrutiny. It's so often they're criticising other countries, we're criticising other governments and other media organisations around the world, but I think it's really important to look at our own countries and make sure they're held up to the highest standards. So that's number one. I would look at places like Reporters Without Borders. They do a lot of work to free and also for the freedom of the press around the world. And that annual report actually talks about the amount of journalists that are now imprisoned around the world as well. And that's increasing. I think their latest report says they're at one of the worst reports in the last 20 years. So it's worth having a look at that as well. But again, I would support media outlets that don't have any powerful interests that they need to answer to as well. That's a really important thing, to look at who owns media outlets and why and how they're reporting and who they're reporting to on our behalf as well.
There's some great journalists in New Zealand working at the moment. There's Scoop NZ, there's Nikki Haga, several of them, correspond. It's a very healthy environment in journalism in NZ. I don't know about the mass media because I don't see it, but I see all of the online activity in New Zealand and it's intelligent, investigative, and lively. I just finish off with a bit of a quote here from Byron. Yet, freedom yet thy banner torn, the flying stream like a thunderstorm against the wind. That's where we are. We continue to I use the word fight, but I don't quite mean that. But the movement towards freedom is continuous and unending. It's a duty.
Thank you both. Nikki Haga, are you in the house? He was. Okay. He was watching the film. We are running almost out of time. I'd like to pose a question to both of you, John and Ben, about, we talked about how the film is humane and emotional, which it is, but I'm curious about your own emotions making this film. If you can talk about, from your perspective, John being the subject of the film, we've seen you in vulnerable positions, and Ben being in those intimate scenes that you shot, how that with capturing your own emotions making this film.
Ben was like the Grand Inquisitor from Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. He just continued. continued, knowing that the interior turmoil of being a human being would eventually reveal things. Although I sound a little bit cranky, often it was I've never been cranky at Ben. It's just often we did that at night after a long, hard day, and having to speak to many, many people, and always trying to think of something fresh and invigorating to say. So that was the source of a little bit of impatience that creeps occasionally.
And I just had a passion to find out about John. I mean, I think the conversations we had now off camera are far less tumultuous, but that was a really stressful time for him and the family. And, obviously he was talking to the press all day. It was in the middle of the extradition hearing. As I said, he'd come back home and we'd sit at the kitchen table and I would ask him about himself. And, I was fascinated by him and his past and his life and how he got to now. And I think there were questions that the audience members had as well, because they're following him obviously for the couple of hours of the film. And I had those questions and just followed my instincts. But, John's a remarkable person, and Stella and Gabriel and the whole family, a lot of affection for all of them. And I learned so much taking part in it and spending that time with them. I think John is probably the most present and person that I've ever met, and he may not be of this world, but he certainly is in it like no one I've ever met, and he inhabits this world and thinks deeply about it, and that really gave me a really life-changing experience of having those months of following him around. So I hope a bit of that was in the film, and you all experienced that as well.
Absolutely. It must be hard, Ben, also because the film finished, but the story is still going on. So there might be an epilogue, and hopefully you have you on for this. So on behalf of Wellington audiences and Dog Edge, once again, thank you both, John and Ben, for doing Thank you all. The film is available until the 10th of July on the virtual festival, so please share it around and you can still watch it in the cinema until then. Have a good night.